Okay, so as usual, since this is less of a how to play Doomfist and more of a how to actually coach yourself, you need to, you know how I always ask, like, is there anything that was cucking you from either your team, the enemy team, or yourself?
Yep.
You basically have to do that to yourself. You have to, like, actually, let's see, do you pull up the enemy team real quick? Your sibling? Oh, wow, okay. So, skip forward. But basically, you have to think about, before you even get into it, you need to ask yourself what you think you did wrong and watch for that to see if A, you're right, and then B, to see what you could have done to prevent whatever you did wrong. I'll get into that when there's an example, but there's a lot of, since you don't have the experience on the hero, your goal isn't to think about where you've messed up and where you can improve. It's more of how you can play around the mistakes that you're frequently making so that you can then figure out. It's less of, so the way coaching with someone else works is they basically tell you what to do right and what you're doing wrong. When you're doing a VOD review for yourself, you need to look at what you're doing wrong and how to not do that, and then that will eventually lead you to doing it right. Because reviewing for yourself can be as effective as a normal coach, but it typically takes a lot longer because you're basically using the process of trial and error along with, you know, other resources if you're watching other streamers or watching YouTube videos or whatever. Okay, so before you even go in, one of the things when you're looking at what you're doing in a VOD, you need to think of every decision that you've made, because if you think about it like a tree, right? Actually, we'll change it to green. If you think of the game as a tree, right? There's always a decision point where it splits, or, you know, sometimes into multiple different possibilities. And then, you know, each one will split again and again and again, etc. And you need to identify whether or not the decision you made was the right one, and then figure out, you know, because you get the advantage of watching the VOD back and seeing like how it plays out. Like, because in the game, you don't necessarily, if you're not super experienced with the hero, especially, you don't get the luxury of knowing exactly how each play plans out. But in a VOD review, you've got 20/20 hindsight, so you can be like, okay, right here, was diving in right here the correct choice? And if it wasn't, then you could be like, okay, I've decided that this was not the right choice for me. You can then think of what should I have done instead. You can be like, well, think of it as objectively as possible. You don't need to think of like high tier strats, whatever, just what are other things you could have done? Like, you could have waited longer, you could have looked at them, you could have been in a different spot, you could have used a different ability to engage. Just basically look at every bit of information that you have and then try and make the most rational decision you can, you know? Basically play through the game again, but basically pausing it whenever there's a key pivotal point, like from the branch, right? And then thinking about, if you had that foresight, what you would have done. Because then, in theory, as you're playing the VOD through, you're basically making decisions as if you were playing perfectly, like as if you were doing every single play as best as you possibly could. And the more you go through that in your own VODs, and the more you practice that mindset of like analyzing all the information you have, the more you'll be able to do that in an actual game. And then the more games you get where you're doing that, the more you record, the more you're looking at games where you're performing well, and the more time you get to then look back on those decisions and then implement the hindsight again. It's sort of like, I don't know how to describe it, but, you know, it's just going back through it over and over and over to try and it's basically just, oh, what was it? Oh, it's like a control group. You know, if you're doing an experiment, you need to have a control group to compare against your results, right? Yep. So the more you do it, the more variables you can account for, and eventually the better your play will get. So in this case, you know, we'll go back. Oh, the other thing you can do, and you should do, is notice how you die. Notice where you die, when you died, what state you were in when you died, like how low you were, stuff like that, and then who you died to. So like watching kill cams is super important, because then you can see how it was from them. See, they weren't looking at you at all. So if you stayed up there, you would have had plenty of time to like survey and figure out who you're up against. So jumping in without looking at them, now that you know that they weren't looking at you, with your hindsight, you can decide that, okay, I could have afforded a few extra seconds to decide on a target and then get a key pick and then get out of there. So you can afford the time to plan. And so notice how when you drop in, she still doesn't immediately react to you. So then you can start to figure out like, okay, certain players will react certain ways on certain heroes to certain things that I do. And then you see over, if you're doing a bunch of VOD reviews of yourself, you'll see how you typically react in situations, like whether you're flash banging too early as McCree or whatever. And you can figure out how your playstyle interacts with the average playstyle of other players, and then correct it to where, on average, you're going to beat them. So in this case, the Brigitte didn't even know where you were, but because you were in her entire team, she was able to kill you with her minimal awareness. So that tells you, okay, you died because Brigitte just kind of found you. So if you can play on the fact that people aren't going to be as aware as you might expect, then you can get picks more easily and get away with more, Where do we go? We'll go all the way back to here. So at this point, this is one of the things, before a team fight breaks out, you can, again, look at each path as it, would open out in front of you. You can decide, well, was it good for me to be low ground? Would it be better for me to be high ground? If it was better for me to be on high ground, which one would it be? Way over here, whatever. And then eventually, the more you do it for, I would recommend sticking to one hero if you're going to be self-VOD reviewing, because then you get used to doing it for that hero. If you're trying to do it on a bunch of different heroes, you can confuse yourself, and you might not. You're basically diluting down the decision-making process. But if you stick to one hero, you can eventually just figure out, like, okay, this is my spot for Doomfist when they're half-capped, for example, Or you can be like, okay, if there's 3 people dead on the enemy team, and they're just about to push again, I need to be like where, and you eventually figure that out so that when you're in game, you don't have to make those decisions. Self-VOD reviewing is basically taking really, really good notes for yourself so that when it comes time to take the test, you're just like, I got this. You don't have to think very hard because you just know it. You just do it out of habit. So as for like specific Doomfist mechanics, I haven't seen you do it yet. But if you charge up your fist, even just a little bit, and then hit spacebar while you're doing it, you'll do a little hop skip thing. And I think it gets you an extra like 50 or 60% to your distance. So if you normally go this far, you can go boop, and then just go absolutely flying with it. So to go, like when you fully charge up a punch, you just go bruh, like that.
Yep, I'm aware of this. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. I recommend practicing that if you plan on getting better Doomfist, because you can get out of so many situations with it, because you just tap right click and tap spacebar and you're gone. When it comes to something like this Tracer is perfect because she's blinked into a wall, which means that her momentum's like carrying her into that wall. You can tell because she's backstepping too. So the basic combo for Doomfist, if you're in a close quarters engagement like this, especially against someone low health like Tracer, is use your E, and then use your primary fire, and then use your shift, and then use your primary fire. And if you hold down left click while you're Eing, you'll shoot instantly. So you basically go, you hop, you immediately shoot, and then as soon as you realize that you've landed, then you can uppercut, because this bit doesn't even like count in your brain because you don't have to think about that. And then once you're up here, you can then aim your next shotgun blast, and that'll kill pretty much anybody if you do it right, depending on how high. If you get high ground off on the slam, they're definitely dead. A lot of times you can just kill them with one slam. But you typically don't want to use your shotgun in a situation like this, where you're just kind of shooting at them. You typically want to use it for a final blow or as part of a combo if you can, because, Doomfist is super ability reliant, and you got to get used to the cadence, right? You go E, shift, and then you've got your fist for either an engage tool and a disengage tool, or as an offensive tool. But you can only pick 2 of those. It's like one of those triangles, right? You can use it as an engage tool, you can use it as a disengage tool, or you can use it as an offensive tool, and you can only pick 2. You can pick one side of the triangle. So you can either engage with it and try and kill someone, but you won't be able to get out, or you can try and engage with it and then try and get out with it, but you won't be able to kill someone, or you can try and get out and try and kill someone, but you won't be able to get in. But since it's on a 4-second cooldown, that's why you get 2 of them. Everything else is on a much longer cooldown. That's why Doomfist typically goes in, gets a pick, and then gets out. Also, when you're going in for something like this, you could see for a split frame there, I'm not going to try and pause it again, but you could see that your landing zone was way back here. So you know that you're going to overshoot her. So you should 180 while you're flying this way, because you can't change your momentum once you've done that. So while you're Eing, turn around, or if you really want to, just try and track her as you're going, so that when you land, you're not disoriented like this. Because it's like, you landed behind her. I don't know if you knew you were going to land behind her or not.
I didn't know I'm going to land behind her.
Yeah, okay. You can also tell, if you don't know where you're going to land just by seeing the thing, you can tell by your momentum, right? Notice how when you're at her, you're still going like full chat forward, and your number's still going up shit ton. Yeah. So you can guess that you don't know necessarily like where in here you're going to land, but you know it's not going to be like right here. So even if you can't track her perfectly as you're going by, which is understandable, you should at least know, okay, I'm going to be roughly behind her, so I'm going to do a rough 180 instead of a rough, like, look into the wall. You typically want to, if you're going to escape like that, instead of uppercutting and slamming, you want to use your fist, just because these two abilities are on a longer cooldown. You want to save them for offensive if you can. If you absolutely have to, you should use uppercut and fist to get out of there. You don't want to use your slam, just because, especially if you're not comfortable with it, it can sometimes clap you. Like, you think you're going to go up and go flying over here, but you actually just kind of drop straight to the ground, for example. That happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But especially, going back to the self-auto-ring bit, when you're in an engagement, like with the Widowmaker, figure out at this point, because you get the benefit of knowing what you were thinking, especially if you do it recently. So go to this point before the engagement even starts and think, okay, what was I planning on actually doing? And then, did you actually do it or did you not? And then if you didn't do it, what went wrong? And then what can you do to fix it in the future, right? It's a lot simpler than a lot of people make it, but it's just, you have to be super slow and analytical and do what I do, which is watch an engagement through and then go back. Because if I stopped right here, I could talk for days about how this engagement should go, but if you watch it forward, you can see how it did go, and then go back and then see what you could have done, you know?
Yep.
It's like you narrow down every single option before you actually get to the point where it matters. Okay, so for this engagement, right, it just ended with this punch. You want to look at it and go through that same step process again. You'd be like, okay, what's my condition? And then what's their condition, if you can? And then how are you going to handle it? In your case, your Doomfist is pretty easy because you're limited by this, and sometimes these. So your order is pretty much predefined for you already. You're choosing to use your fist as an engage tool. You're sort of waiting for your cooldowns, but it seems like you're more focusing on the enemy Widow. So you're thinking, okay, she's going to grapple, and then I'm going to kill her, but you didn't quite realize what your cooldowns were. So when you punch her, and she lives, you don't immediately... You couldn't follow up, exactly. And because your fist... It's sort of like Brigitte, right? If you start an engagement with your like whip shot thing, you're sending the enemy flying way away from you, and then you can't hit him with your flail. Doomfist is the same way. You don't want to rocket punch somebody out of your range to the point where you then have to use your E to close the gap. You want to use your E to bring them towards you, because you've got this little thing that sucks them towards you. You want to pop them up, you want to shotgun them, and if you can't kill them, then you can decide, okay, are you going to use your fist to try and go for the final blow against a wall, or are you going to use it to get out of there, or are you just going to like chill there and try and shotgun them to death later? The options unfold from there. But if you're still at the point where you couldn't finish up because of your ability management, then everything past that doesn't really matter, because you need to focus on the bits that get you to the... You basically need to be consistent with as many big important things as you can before you work on being consistent with all of the micro strats that make you like a really good top tier player. It'd be like playing Widowmaker and figuring out like through VOD, be like, oh, I can't hit headshots if I'm grappling and 180ing. It's like, okay, sure, that might be something you can't do. But if you also never use your Venom Mine and grapple into Winston's, that's a much bigger problem that you should work on first. So the trickiest part probably of self-VOD reviewing is either A, identifying the mistakes that you're making and then figuring out how to fix them, or B, figuring out like... I totally lost my train of thought. what was it saying? Oh yeah, prioritizing what those mistakes actually are and which ones you should actually work on first. Because if you think you're like, you can work on landing grapple shots and you'll look like a good Widow, but that you only look like a good Widow in the kill cams. Every other like part of the game, you'll be looking a little scuffed. The other thing with self-VOD reviewing, in case of this 1v1, it sort of pops up, is look into just how your abilities work. Like, it seems really stupid and obvious, but just the thing with Overwatch is that heroes have pretty simple abilities in general, but they provide a lot of complex options and playstyles just based on them, especially with Doomfist. So if you know how each little mechanic works on each little ability, then you can start to create your own little theories and intertwine how they can work, right? It's like, okay, it's like for Genji, right? Somebody can figure out, you can right click and then you can dash, but you can also right click and animation cancel with your melee. So like, therefore you should be able to right click dash immediately. And then they're like, oh, then you can combine those two. You can right click dash, right click melee, right? This is the part where you just kind of got to sit down and read through everything. In this case, it'd help you figure out that you can slam, left click, and then uppercut because your primary fire is animation cancelable. And then the other bit is if you look into his uppercut, you'll notice that when you pop someone up, they hover for a bit along with you. So it's not like you go up and then straight back down. It's kind of like you go up and then you chill for a bit and then you drop. So this time right up here is when you want to be aiming your shotgun, not while you're flying through the air, like upwards or downwards. Let's see if I can point out. That was a little bit weird too because she like bounced off the roof up there, but you know, that's part of just knowing like how the ability works. Like she kept momentum, so she slid all over the place. I'm not saying you should have known exactly where she was going to go. I did a little waving hand motion there you couldn't see, but it was like, ooh. So just know that each little minutia of your kit has something cool about it that almost always works with something else. You know, it's like Hammond, right? It's like you've got your abilities, you grapple in, you slam, and then you shield, and then shield conveniently pops you out of your ball so that you can start shooting at people, and your grapple gives you height for your slam, and then when you're up in the air, you can minefield, and then it all rains down on people. Like, everything works together with pretty much every single hero. Like, Overwatch, people give Blizzard some flack for their character design or the balancing or whatever, but the kits at least work well together. So it's your job to basically look at that toolkit that you're provided and then use it as effectively as you can. It's like right there. Look at the engagement. Figure out, okay, what's going on? This is one of those points of branching possibilities. You've committed to your punch. You're going to have your uppercut soon, and you have your E. So you're choosing to use your punch as an engage tool and then figure out, okay, who am I going to go for? Baby Diva, all right. Then decide, was that a good use of your ability or abilities? And then figure out, okay, if it was a good use, who were you going to go for next? And then would you have the abilities to kill them? And then would it have been a good value at all? So like in this case, you used your uppercut before your slam. And that was a mistake because now you're having to fall from super far away. She's flying in the air. Like a lot of times it'll happen, you land before they land if you slam too early. And in your case, you slam and you don't necessarily know where she's going to be because she's all over the place. And then you try and punch the wall, which, you know, she was low enough. Look at how low she is. You didn't need to invest your ability in that. And in the VOD review stage, you should be like, okay, did I get value out of that if it even happened? So take what didn't happen, look at what would have happened if it did work, and then decide, okay, was that even good in theory? Which in this case, using your rocket punch to deal like 30 damage to an Ana is not a good choice because you could have just saved some of your shotgun blasts or, you know, like watch. It's like you weren't quite comfortable with the projectile speed of his shotgun. So if you'd have invested some practice into that, then you would have killed that Ana and you wouldn't have had to use all of your abilities basically.
Yeah.
When you get into a spot of floundering, like right there, where you're just kind of like using abilities all over the place, this is when you can tell that you're not super comfortable in the hero. Like you don't have that intuition of, okay, I go here and I do this, which is totally normal. And that's, you need, as long as you can identify that, that's good. It's not bad to have that. That just means that there's room to improve. the more comfortable you're on a hero, the easier like and more natural it becomes, you know? It's like when you're a toddler learning how to walk or whatever, walking's hard, but when you're an adult, you can learn how to like do gymnastics and everything. You got to build from the basics. Every adult is good at walking, and every Doomfist player is good at like basic things. But the good Doomfist players that actually look at what they can do with their basic abilities, i.e. the gymnastics people, they're the ones who are actually like super high on ladder. Like once you get to the point where you're doing like crazy rollouts and stuff, that's the ultimate use of his kit, is figuring out how it interacts with your environment. That was probably the closest to using his kit like in the right order. Notice how you use your fist for engage, your slam second, and your uppercut third with your primary fire interspersed. And then if you identify, okay, this is a good use order, you actually did everything in the exact right order of fist, E, left click, shift, left click. Then you can just work on practicing that mechanic and shaving down the time, because if this is an action, an action, an action, and an action, and all of this is time in between, if you can crunch that down to just like this little tiny bit, which the hero will let you do, then you have all of this time to either get cooldowns back or recharge your primary fire or get a health pack or, you know, strafe, whatever you want to do. It's all open to you now. And that's space that you can cram in with more VOD reviewing. So you're condensing the time between everything, whether it be decision making, actual mechanics, or, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like if you learn a map, you get faster at getting places. Like if you've never played King's Row before, you're gonna wander around all over the place.
Well, that was my first time playing King's Row with Doomfist, so.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm not so aware of the positioning.
Oh yeah. No, definitely. If this is your first time playing a map,
I was trying to figure it out. Yeah.
If this is your first time playing a map with a hero, then it's going to be extremely rough, because how much have you played Doomfist in the past?
I just started like last week.
Okay, yeah. So you've got a totally open canvas here, which is cool because you can develop your own playstyle. And if you do self-VOD reviewing, your playstyle will be, you know, it'll be correct, but it'll also be super unique because you've worked through everything and you've decided what works well. And somebody else might decide what works well, but if they make a YouTube video on it, everybody else will do that too, and then that playstyle becomes counterable. The more you self-VOD review and the more you differentiate your playstyle from other players, the harder you are to counter, you know?
Yeah.
Like if you're someone like Defran who just like sits Bastion on top of the enemy Reinhardt, it's like they don't know how to play against that because they've never done that. But if you're like Ryan main number 6000 that just throws out his shatter willy-nilly, then the enemy's going to play around that instantly. Same thing with Doomfist. Like, you can tell a good Doomfist from a bad one really easily. And the ones with the weirdest playstyles and the hardest to predict playstyles are generally the better ones, even if they're not as mechanically good. Like, if they misuse an ability or whatever, that's okay. But as long as the enemy can't counter you, it doesn't matter, because just being good is good. It doesn't matter the context of it. Or I guess I'm saying it does matter the context. I don't really know what I'm getting at there.
Here I saw that this rollout works, so I was just repeating.
Yeah, see? That's you identified something that works, and you stuck with it. And then the more you play Doomfist, you can realize, like, is this rollout actually good? Is there another one over here that's better? How can I optimize it, right? You just got to go through and figure out what works. I don't remember. Do you play a bunch of heroes, or do you only play a few?
I play mainly DPS, but I play Mercy as well.
Okay, so since you have the perspective of other DPS heroes, you can put yourself in the perspective of someone on the enemy team playing against a Doomfist, and then think about what that Doomfist could do to you in any given moment to kill you, right? Like if there's a Smurf, like a GM Doomfist Smurf in your game, and you just imagine the worst case scenario of what he'd be doing, and you try and emulate that, basically play against yourself in your own head. The more you do that, it's like playing chess against yourself or using a Yu-Gi-Oh deck against yourself. Like you can improve a ton by doing that. I'm honestly amazed I didn't kill you faster. That was incredible. But when it comes,
lots of shields though.
actually, how many did you have? 315. 380. Yeah, you just like kept getting just enough shields. But with your ultimate, you can also, the same branching path thing. You can use it either offensively or defensively. And that's all part of playstyle. People are like, oh, Doomfist ult is better to get out of there. It's situational. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But if you figure out which one you're more likely to go for, or whether it's vice versa, figure out which one you're better with, and then you've got your default. And once you get your default, then you can branch off to the other one if the circumstance requires it. That way you're not always having to be like, oh, which one do I go for? You just have it preloaded.
Yeah, I like to go for the offensive one.
Yeah, I do as well. It's more fun. You feel like you get more value, but at the same time, I can tell when I need to use my ult to get out of there. And once you get better at using that default and figuring out what situations you need to change from, you need to deviate from your default, you can then figure out, you work your way backwards. So your ult finishes. I don't know what word that is. Whatever. So your ult finishes, and then you go backwards in time and be like, okay, I'm at 80% ult. How do I get to my ult? And then how do I use it? Something like that. So you just keep working it back forward, playing engagements back forward and backward, every single different possibility, and just go nuts on predicting what could happen. And basically theory craft. It's like here, I haven't seen you go for a huge flank before, but you're trying it. So since that was like the first big flank of the game, you can look at that and be like, okay, was it the right time to do it? Did I use my abilities in the right order? Etc, etc, etc. Was my target right? Would it have mattered if their hero, or if the hero who came up there was any different? Like if a diva flew up, would you have still been alright? Etc. Ooh, contesting Doomfist. Contesting Doomfist, a lot like contesting Tracer, is a pretty quick way to figure out that you don't know your abilities or your use cases for them as well as you think you do. A lot of players, I've seen them up even in GM, they're good as long as they can plan things out and they're not put under crazy pressure. But when you're solo overtime capping, like on 2CP or in this case a payload or whatever, and you're an ability reliant hero, suddenly your emphasis goes from just use your abilities to get some picks to, excuse me, dude, you really need to pay attention to your abilities, because if you mess up a shift, then you're probably not going to live long enough to get another one. So that's when the intuition of the hero really comes through. Like if I flex to a hero to keep overtime, I can tell that I'm flexing, and the enemy team can tell too. So like right there is the combo of going in with your punch, not finishing off the person you went for initially, not being sure of where your E is going to put you, and then, dying past that, but who knows what would have happened afterwards. That comes with experience, and, the more you self-auto review, the more experience you're giving yourself without actually playing the game.
Then kill yourself. It was literally out of position.
Out of context, though. I love it. Then kill yourself. Off of that little thing, it's not part of VOD everything. That's why I was debating. So I was quiet because I was debating whether to say it or not. But since you mentioned this was your first time playing Doomfist on King's Row, there's a few options that you can do to get better at rollouts if you want to work on that, or just positioning in general. Is just go into a custom game as that hero and just look around for spots. Like see, like if you don't know how high your uppercut takes you, you can be like, well, can I get up here? Is that a thing I can do? Is that a tool that's in my kit? Can I drop down here, punch, uppercut, slam? Is that a thing I can do? Can I drop down just uppercut, slam? Can I uppercut way up here? Like if you don't know that stuff, then experimenting in a custom game helps you figure that out. And even better would be to do it with a friend who either has, whether they have more experience or less experience on the hero, it doesn't matter, because you go from like one set of eyes to having two sets of eyes, and they're gonna see totally different perspectives on how the hero works. One dude might be super focused on where you can slam from, and you might be super focused on where you can uppercut to. And if you guys both work together and figure out like, oh, dude, I just found this cool spot, then suddenly you both have that experience and you can teach each other how to get to that cool spot and teach each other what you can do from that spot. And it's a mutually beneficial engagement there. And then you can move on to, if you're just bored finding spots or whatever, you can just go and have a gentleman's agreement of like, okay, I'm going to set this to skirmish. We're going to meet, I don't know, at the statue or whatever. And we're just going to like 1v1 and just see who can out 1v1 the other in a mirror match. Because if you're mirror matching on heroes like Tracer, Genji, Doomfist, Widow, like sometimes McCree too, Soldier, pretty much any DPS really, but the first few I listed, they're super reliant on A, their abilities, and B, their outplay. So if you mess up an ability and the other dude outplays you, that teaches them how to outplay you, and it teaches you what you did to get outplayed. So again, it's like VOD reviewing is doubling, essentially, you're playing 2 or 3 games for the same time investment as 1, plus some outside game. And playing custom games with friends, or just random people even, I wouldn't recommend that though, is just increasing your experience on a map. Like there, it's like boom, you figured out that you can get up there. And what are you gonna use it for? You're gonna drop one of the fucking Hanzo. Is that what you want to do? Was that a good choice? Yes, no, maybe so. Figure that out, and then if it was one of the scenarios where you try and uppercut and you just fall in the hole, you're gonna you'll realize in game that wasn't a good choice. But in a VOD review, you can catch the little mistakes that you might not have noticed in game of like, because in game you'll think, okay, I could have killed that Hanzo if I did XYZ, or I could have killed the Reinhardt if I did XYZ. In a VOD review, you can be like, okay, what do I do next time to make sure that I always kill them? Or what did I do wrong? Like in that case, you were too close to the wall when you uppercutted, and just the angle that you uppercutted wasn't in your favor. You'd be like, I dealt some damage, but at the same time, you're trying to escape too close to your team this way, and you're cutting the corner close. Instead, you should have just done a little micro punch that way and then go that way, or just fully invest to going over there, or, go even deeper if you want to. I wouldn't recommend that. But, it's not like, what went wrong? It's like, what went wrong, and then how can I make sure it never happens again? Or, like your Moira or the enemy Moira falling off the edge and your Lucio falling off the edge. Hopefully they figure out that edge is there, and they don't do that again. I don't think they're going to review their VOD and figure that out, but it's one of those things that you should figure out in-game. Like, if this was your first time reviewing your own VOD, the things you should have picked up on thus far are your 180s when you slam, and your ability usage in fights in general. Not necessarily in specific, but in general. And then your positioning, like whether you're coming from the right spots or not. Those are the few things that you should be able to realize, like, okay, there are things I can work on, and then you can start working on them, and then, go from there. Oh god, we gotta skip so far forward. So like right there, for your punch, if you did like reading into your wikis or whatever, figuring out the minutiae of your abilities, you'll know how much damage it does when someone hits a wall, and roughly how much damage it does as you're charging it up. So, if you play Widow, you'll know at what point during your charge you can one-shot somebody. Doomfist is the same way, but he also incorporates distance into it. So, since you did a little light tap on her, we'll go for it again, you got some damage off, but she wouldn't have slid far enough to hit that wall. And if the more time you practice with that, you can figure out, okay, how much longer would I have had to charge it for her to hit that wall for her to die? And, since it's Doomfist, you always have to wonder, will she just slide off the wall for absolutely no reason? Or, will you get CC'd or whatever? Doesn't matter. Because there's the base mechanic of the distance to time ratio, and damage, I guess, slid in there too, of your punch. And once you figure that out, that's just one more thing you can cross off your list. It's one more thing you're adding to your toolkit. Actually, what is your team comp? Okay. Looking at their team comp, since we've talked a lot about like focusing on what mechanics are good and bad, when you're doing a VOD review too, you can focus on what like meta things are good or bad. Like, who are you focusing? Are you going for the Xenaton? Are you going like only for the Reinhardt? You can look at which ones you're historically going for, and then which ones have the best success rate. So say you get 3 out of 4 Zens and you only get 1 out of 10 Reins. Just statistically, you should be able to figure out that Zen's the better choice, just because you're more successful, and then you can figure out, okay, does Rein give me like this much value, and Zen gives me like this much? If it's one of the cases where the one with the highest success rate and the higher value happen to, line up, then boom, you're golden. If it's one of the cases where it's more like this, then you got to figure out, okay, is it better to be more successful for consistent value, or is it better to be less successful for big plays? And generally, when you're focusing on VOD reviews, you want to go for consistency, because the more consistent you are, the more you can work on getting your big plays. One thing I've noticed you haven't done, like before this fight, is you haven't really used your abilities for mobility outside of the fight, outside of just leaving spawn. So now that your Rocket Punch is off cooldown, I'm glad that you don't then go for another Rocket Punch to get up to choke, because then you'd be basically missing a third of your kit, and that's a terrible decision. It'd be like Tracer blinking 2 or 3 times to get to somebody without recall. Like that's a bad idea. So if you can recognize what you're doing that's good, alongside what you're doing that's bad, then you don't want to only focus on the parts that you can improve on, because then you'll only focus on that, and then you'll lose what actually made you effective in the first place, and you sometimes might even you might regress a little bit. And if you regress a little bit, that's okay, because most of the time you'll bounce back and leap further forward anyway. But some people can just get totally bogged down, like with, oh, I'm garbage at doing this, and this, but they don't realize like what actually got them to that rank in the first place. A lot of the times people do that with their aim. They're like, oh, my aim's bad, that's why I'm in this rank, or like I can't aim at anything, so I'm never going to get anywhere. And they focus only on their aim, and then they mess up every other part of their kit as a sacrifice. And even if their aim improves, because they put so much focus into their aim, they ended up regressing a lot more because they sacrificed everything else. Long-winded explanation aside, let's look at this real quick. So that first little engagement, that's showing that you understand the 3 parts of getting in, doing stuff, and then getting back out. That's solid, because you figured out sort of what abilities you prefer to use to engage and what preferred abilities you have to disengage. The more you know about yourself, the better you're going to be. Even if it's not correct, the better you are at using it, it's okay. You can use, if you've got a screw that's, Phillips head, you can use a flathead screwdriver for that if you've got the right sized one, but the perfect tool still exists. So if you're using the wrong abilities to do the right thing and you get good with it, sure, it's not optimal, but you can still get the job done.
Yeah.
Like in this case, your ability usage, engage, slam, uppercut, you've got the rough cadence down. Now it's just who you went for was not right, because he had a bubble and an ult. Your timing was the fight is pretty much done now, since they invested a lot into it and your team's respawning. Both your supports are alive, but that's pretty much it. So get out of there. But you're working on the basics, and that's you improve by getting the basics down. What? Wait, where was she? Hang on. Wait, did she blink into that? Or was that your tracer? Do you have a tracer?
No.
Oh, she's right there. What the hell? Wait, did she like go this way and then blink in there? Dude. She's still behind you. What? What? Dude, what is that? What?
I hate her?
Oh. Okay. Sure. So sometimes you gotta acknowledge that Doomfist in particular has a weird kit. Don't plan around this happening, but if you can prepare yourself for stuff weird happening in general, then it's, you know, sort of like preparing for consistency. You can't prepare for stuff like this because what the hell? But if you get, you know, the more you get accustomed to dealing with situations as they occur, the more natural you'll be, and you'll be like, oh, I got a hit marker with my slam. That means somebody's nearby. It may or may not have been the tracer that was behind you for some reason, but if you got a hit marker with your slam, then you can figure out, based on your intuition, which abilities you want to go for next. So like right there, you spent a lot of time on your punch trying to figure out where she was, but if you got that slam, we'll watch it again. If you got that slam, figured out, you know, admittedly you can't tell where she's at. I couldn't even tell. I had to watch it back like 5 different times, but if you relied on your intuition of slam, left click, uppercut, left click, then as soon as you got that hit marker, you could have just uppercutted and used whatever time they were in the air to find them and then shoot them. In this case, it was a tracer, so she'd recall at this point, but you would have still nailed this whole part right over here. And if you nailed that whole part, then you're still making progress. You know, because at this point, if you didn't realize that you should have uppercut, then you can look at what do you have now. You don't have slam and you don't have fist, so your only ability is uppercut and eventually ult. But if somebody came into this room, you can think, would I survive if it's a Roadhog? Would I survive if it's a half health Moira? Every sort of situation that could come about, or let me say is likely to come about, you can plan for it in general. Having just slam as an ability kind of sucks. Having half health kind of sucks. But, you know. One thing, this is a little bit of micro Doomfist play. You punch. Notice how you ult with basically 2 abilities up. If you can burn those abilities before you ult, then while you're in ult, they'll be recharging. Like, watch your punch cooldown as you go. When you land, you're basically done with your invulnerability period here because you're being attacked. But notice how you have your punch back. If you invested all of your abilities to kill somebody and then like meteor striked, you'd have most of your abilities back to keep steamrolling forward. This is one of those situations where there's so many people, it's easy to get overwhelmed. If you think about the whole value thing I was talking about earlier with the 1 in 10 Rhine or the 3 in 4 Zen, if you know who your default target should be, when there's 6 million people there, you just think, okay, I don't have the ability to think about who to kill right now because there's so much going on, but I've got my default. And since you're deciding to self-VOD review, you've invested time into figuring out what the best default is so that you don't need to worry about it in the heat of the moment. So at this point, you've decided, I'm going to chill here and not go in. Is that a good decision? You should ask yourself that. In this case, yes it is, because if you went in, you'd just feed. Doomfist can't 1v6 very well, because, you know, it's the same thing that applies to Tracer. This is the enemy team, this is your team, this is you. You cannot just go in on your own. You need to wait for your team and the enemy team to get into a little skirmish and apply pressure to each other, and then you can come in and clean house on the Zenyatta or whoever you decide is your optimal target. Another little tiny tip for Doomfist is when you're slamming like this, I'll point out real quick. Notice how you can see your landing area on the ground. If you are in a spot where you're just like, say you're right here and you're looking forward and you can't see your slam on the ground, you'll take an arc where you fall like this. But if you see your slam area right here, you'll go like that. And because of this little parabolic bit here, you'll deal more damage with like slam A than with slam B. Like a considerable amount more damage. It's a lot harder to land because you don't know exactly where you're going to land unless you put practice into it. But it's kind of useful if you're investing, like if somebody's standing still to choke, like pretend there's an Ana here and you're standing right up here, you can just like drop off slam and you can get like a ridiculous amount of damage on her for free and then just left click uppercut her and then she's done, rather than trying to blast straight down onto her and only dealing like 30 damage with your slam or something pathetic, right?
Yep.
Yeah, see, you burned all of your abilities on one hero, and you have no way to get out.
I kind of had to make the decision: do I get out or do I punch her to death?
Yeah,
And I guess I thought punching her to death was better because I can get back to the fight sooner.
yeah. Punching her, I think she had like half HP. I'm not going to go back and try and find the specific frame, but I think I remember seeing her at about half HP. Punching her to secure the kill is worth it in this case, because if you didn't punch her, you're already low enough to where you're not going to get out reliably. So since you've committed this far to getting the Moira kill, if you commit this little bit further with your punch, you're going to get a lot more value than if you just kind of like stop right here and then just die, and then you get no value, pretty much. You just fed the Moira and maybe forced fade. So you made the right choice here in this case, but you could have prevented having to make this choice in the first place by planning out this little slam bit. Wait for it. Planning this out, slamming, left clicking, uppercut, left clicking, etc. Or, you know, forcing out fade. Because if you landed your left clicks on her, or left clicked her in general, you wouldn't have had to worry about securing the kill with your punch, and then you could have just gotten out or gone deeper, or used it to punch somebody in a wall to try and get your meteor strike to get out or to kill more people. You know, just roll with it. Like, you've done this bit twice now, unless I'm mistaken. Twice in recent history, we'll say. And each time, wait for it, you can see your little blue flash up there, and you're deciding to use your punch, which is good, because your punch is on a much shorter cooldown than your E is. So you're investing the less valuable and more frequent ability to get to the same spot and get the same net result, which means that you spend less downtime waiting. Like in this case, you went in a little too early because you didn't have both of these abilities. If you had your slam, you could have slammed or your uppercut, I mean. If you had your uppercut, you could have uppercutted someone up and then saved or bought time to get your punch. But this is one of those engagements where you went in and you basically just fed because nobody was around. Your team's still grouping up in spawn or in choke like this. Poor Lucio. Nice you. The thing with VOD reviews is don't really focus on your team. If you focus on your team, focus on how you're working with them and how you're interacting with them, like in their hero mechanics, rather than just how you're working with them as players. Because you can't control for what kind of teammates you're going to get, but you can control with how you interact with the typical Moira on your team. Like again, your team sort of went in. Did they even? You got Genji. And I think just Genji with you. Yeah, D.Va dies. That's about it. It's again one of those times where you go in and there's nobody around to help you, and the enemy team can just focus all of their efforts towards you, and you get insta-gibbed. Unfortunate charge, yes, but would you have died in another way in another second or two? Yes. There's one of those cases where you burned all of your abilities to get to the point faster, and when you're on point contesting as Doomfist, you absolutely need your abilities. So you're sacrificing getting there in time for not being able to stay there very long. And since you've already got teammates here, it's a much better use of your time and abilities to chill for a bit and then, you know, invest properly in the time. Also, we got guy. I'm not going to say that right. Or Orochi? I don't even know, dude. Anyway, something name OW. I appreciate the follow, dude. Thank you. Okay, this is one of those times where, did you have enough information to go in on this? This is also one of the slams that, you'll see what I mean, where you deal way more damage. Notice how you get 95 this time, and you normally get like 70.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where you know that there are enemies here, but you don't necessarily know who you're going to get. So unless you're super good at quick decision making, and you can figure out who your default is, then this is kind of a risky play. Especially with the fact that your team's all back here. Like, they're not even pushing around this corner at all. So the enemy team, like, the Rhine doesn't even need to be looking at your team at all. He can just focus on you. Ah, see, you had a plan. Go in, kill somebody, get out. It almost worked. It was so close to working. And it's one of those things where, like, what could you have done to make it work? In this case, it might have been escape a different way or use your abilities in a different order. It doesn't, whatever you figure out is best, just implement that in the future. VOD reviewing is surprisingly simple. Were you trying to boost yourself up there?
Yeah.
Okay, that's part of the
It
thing.
worked last time.
That's part of the thing that'll come from like custom game practice. If you can't get it, you don't want to spend this time. Yeah, see, you figured it out. You can just go the other way. If you spend time in custom games figuring that out, then like for example, there's a spot right about here where you can dash up as Genji and like crouch there for a blade. And unless you either watched a streamer do that, accidentally did it yourself, or practiced on a custom game, you'd never know about it. And it's one of those things that can win games. Like you making it up that thing, that in the future might get you onto point to contest and win overtime and win you a game. And if you can win a single game with a single trick, that's 25 SR or 30 SR or whatever for one little like tip and trick. And if you learn like 10 tips and tricks, that's 250 SR for free. It's not going to be instant, but it's going to be spread out over time. And if somebody offered me 250 SR for free, or for just a little bit of time spent messing around in custom games, I would take it for sure. There we go. 50 damage on the slam from a higher up location. So half as much, higher, faster. In this case, you'd want to go for the like long fall one, just so you could have insta-gibbed that Moira. How did that? Hang on. Okay, see, there you slammed, and you knew that you were gonna have to face out that doorway, so you figured it out. It's like with your 180s. You're gonna. I'm guessing now that you're better at your 180s because you showed that you're better with your slam awareness with this little Reinhardt bit. Hang on. What happened to that Moira? Oh, an extra quarter of a second on the charge up there. I would qualify that as a mixture of unlucky and just like, oof. It's not like, oh, a bad Doomfist play. It's more just like, oh, man. Just a little bit of a mess up. See, there you go. Except you invested your punch in. You've got 4 of your primary fire here. You should invest more of your primary fire and less of your punch. Because if you had your punch here, you could have punched this dude into the wall that your shotgun just hit. And boom, you gotten 2 picks for free, gotten the soldier ult for free, and then your team would have pushed super easily through here. Looks like they're already winning anyway, but, you know. See, you picked their Zen, and I don't know if he had trance or what, but if he did have trance and he was planning on using it, he can't use it.
See if we can stagger them.
This is one of those punches where you want to ask yourself, you can do this in game because you're charting it for so long. It's like when you pop out on the other end of this, are you going to be in a situation where you can perform an action that will get you equal or greater value than the tools that you invested into it? In this case, your punch. Will you die when you do this? Potentially. Will you get any value? Potentially. It's just how high are those potentials?
So in this case, I was just trying to stall so that I could get the point secured.
So your plan was to basically bop somebody away? Like if they come around that corner, you're just going to punch them away?
Well, they could hear the punch being loaded, so they stay away.
Interesting. I don't know if they'd even plan. I don't know if.
Come.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if they'd plan that far ahead. I think if this Zenyatta really wanted to contest, he'd just walk around this corner and go for it. But part of me just thinks.
Oh, well, then I would punch him.
Yeah, then you just punch him into the hole or into a wall or whatever. You know, if you want to use your kit for meta stuff like that and trying to outplay people, go for it. That's a lot higher level than I was expecting. Like I wouldn't know if they'd actually like hear that and get, you know, oh. Hang on. All right, there we go. All right, let's go, dude. Figuring things out literally as the single game progresses. It's like I'll say something and then you implement some form of it like within the minute. Like in this case, you use an engage tool, you saw the situation, you're like, nope, and then you got out of there. And it worked because you already sort of had a plan in mind. You're like, I'm going to go over there, see what's up, and then get out. If it doesn't work, then you're going to get out, I should say. And if there is somebody there, then I'm guessing you would have dropped on them and tried to get value there. And then your escape would have been a lot harder. But in this case, it worked smoothly. Oh, dude, 1v1ing a Pharah's Doomfist is high-level stuff. The best way to do it is to basically punch up next to her, uppercut, and then just use that momentum that she has to predict your shotguns pretty easily. If you like can bop on her head too with your punch, that's even better because you can just stand on her. But that only happens once every blue moon. For the most part, though, Pharah shouldn't be your priority. If you happen to kill her, you should clip it, put it on Reddit or whatever. But for the most part, just stick to whatever. See there? You use your punch for potential value. Didn't get the value you wanted. And now you're having to run away. Or in this case, die to the Pharah. The aggro fade Moira. Nice. I've also noticed that you've tried out a bunch of different methods of rolling out a spawn. Like at this point you slammed and then you uppercut and then you're punching later. The best way to do it, depending on the spawn, is to punch with your little jump and then uppercut and then slam. Or if the spawn is one where you can walk out and do the uppercut slam first, that puts your longer cooldown abilities on cooldown first, and then you use your punch second so that you get them all back kind of in one lump, instead of getting these two back a little while after you get punched back. See, there you go. There's your wombo combo. And you got your fist out. Look at that. See, that was a free pick. And now you've got your whole kit back, and you can do it again. Rinse and repeat. Oh. Oh! Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was like a 4-second delay on that slam. Holy Moses, dude. See, that's the creative use of the kit. I don't know if you meant to or not, but that's one of those...
That was... So one of my goals was actually to disrupt the Ryan, and try to get him out of position and stuff like that.
Well, you achieved that goal, and now in the future, you know how Slam interacts with Reinhardt. If you can get landing the Slam first is like, if you can do that routinely and stop his hammer, then you can use your uppercut like you did there and prolong it even further. But the more common way to do it is to get right up close and then just uppercut him. But they also predict that pretty easily, so they won't try and slam. But that's the advanced hero interactions for further study. But that said,
actually happened twice, I think.
Twice total or twice in the VOD? Did I miss one?
No, not in the VOD.
Oh, okay. I was like, I'm pretty. I hope I would have noticed that.
But on the other, it's pretty funny.
So that said, I brought up a mixture of Doomfist stuff and a mixture of self-VOD reviewing stuff. I think I repeated myself a ton for the VOD reviewing, but part of that's because I haven't done a review where I've taught someone how to review themselves, so I'm kind of figuring this out as I go too. But is there anything you want me to clarify more on, or at least try to clarify more on?
Not really. I think it's pretty clear.
Wow. I both don't believe that, but I'm also happy.
I was writing some notes here.
Oh, nice. So let me do